forming Christ in the believer. TvGrace International presents the ineffable words of God, the gospel of grace, on the lips of the man, Christ Jesus. Abba Father.
We have a message. The title of the message is The Head of the Church. Let's quickly look for John's historical book to move forward to John chapter 14, verse 18. First of all, John. Historical book, not gospel, as the religious system calls it. This is a historical book of the days of Jesus in the days of his flesh. It is not New Covenant because Jesus had not died when it was written. That is why I call it historical. Without intending to upset anyone, it is a fact that the New Testament commences with the passing of the testator. And so this book was written before he died. Therefore, it is not New Testamentary, but it is the history of the things that Jesus said while he was here on earth. So, there is a promise in verse 18, where Jesus says in verse 18, I will not leave you orphans, I will come to you. Take note, the subject is the head of the church. Today we are talking about the head. Where is the mind? Where in the body? In the head. But then notice that Jesus says, I will not leave you orphans. What? That the world was orphaned. Yes, the world was orphaned. Because the law was an added covenant. That was not the heart of God. Therefore, Jesus in the days of his flesh saw the church as an orphan. Moses could do nothing. The prophets, no one could do anything. When he says, I will not leave you as orphans, it is because the whole world was an orphan, fulfilling the law, seeking God in the temples. There was a state of orphanhood. Then, after he promises, I will not leave them orphans. Then it says in chapter 16, verse 12. Look what it says, verse 12. It says, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. It means that he says, I will not leave them orphans, but I still cannot explain to them. Because if I tell you what I have for you, you will not be able to bear it. It means that when he says, I will send you a comforter, I will not leave you orphans. Years go by, and for 2,000 years the church has been orphaned. Although it had a father, but many things could not be said. Because even though Paul was a father, he was a father in the aspect of leaving written information. But Paul did not achieve anything. The world remained orphaned because he was killed. They did not believe in him because the disciples themselves were orphans, since the disciples were also considered as orphans. Well, he says, I have a lot of things to say, but I'm not going to tell you. Well, I leave you orphans. Because fatherhood comes when you have information. There can be three people in front. If you don't know who your father is, you are still an orphan. Then he says, I have many things to tell you. I will not leave you orphans. Now, I'm not going to tell you anything yet. And then he uses Paul to leave a foundation, but Paul is killed. And Paul says, they have all forsaken me. Paul could not make it. He says, after my departure, they will reduce them to slavery and they will remain orphans. So for 2,000 years, the church has been an orphan. Orphaned in a way in a sense that has been headless. It has had no direction. So, And the proof is in the thousands of denominations out there. Look, there are the Catholics, there are the Protestants, there are the Mormons, there are the Jehovah's Witnesses, there are the spiritualists, there are evangelicals from different parts and all. They say that they do not agree. Some say that baptism is by sprinkling, pouring a stream of water from above. Others say it must be by immersion. And others use different rites, ceremonies, and they all differ. So there is a diversity, as if they were saying we don't have one head to lead us. Yes, there is a head here, a Catholic head, a Protestant head, a Jehovah's Witness head, a Mormon head, a Methodist head, a Baptist head, and a Pentecostal head. And there are thousands of heads, but it is one head. The body can only carry one head. It cannot carry so many heads. Therefore, he gave a caution. Let's look now at the historical book. One book earlier, Luke. Look what Luke says. Luke chapter 9. Because he said these things before he went to the cross. And so we now have the evidence. And because of Paul's 14 epistles, we can discover this revelation. Chapter 9, verse 57 and 58. Luke chapter 9, verse 57 and 58. They journeyed on the road. Are we all there? Yes? If you don't have a Bible, you can look at the electronic bulletin board. It says, now it happened as they journeyed on the road that someone said to him, Lord, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. As if he was saying, this man says, look, I'm going to follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, don't talk too much. Look, don't talk nonsense. For I have not yet revealed my head. How can you promise me that you will follow me if you have no provision to follow me? Notice that he says to Jesus, look, I will follow you wherever you want. But look what Jesus says back to him. Look, foxes, the birds of the air. Now the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And you may be thinking, shepherd, he was very poor. He had nowhere to buy a pillow. What, that he needed a pillow? No. But if he had a treasurer and Judas stole and had enough left over for other things, how could he not be able to buy a pillow? Or a mattress or something where he could lay his head? He wasn't talking about that. He didn't. He had nowhere to lay his mind. He didn't have anywhere to put the covenant yet. And then he says to him, look, until I find a man and give him guidelines, you cannot say that you are going to follow me because you are going to follow Jesus of Nazareth. You are going to be troubled as everybody is. Look, Moses is troubled. Everybody is troubled. Religions are troubled. Look, they all differ. That is why they cannot stand us. Because they hear us and they say, and what is that? You don't see that they are so far away, are so orphaned that when this ministry comes, they do not know how to discern. Then Jesus says, look, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He could not lay it on the apostles because what was he going to lay it on those 11 men? Just imagine. They are going to preach Judaism to the Gentiles. I cannot lay it down. I have to find a man where I'm going to lay my head briefly. I'm going to lay it on Paul. And that's why Paul said, but we have the mind of Christ for the first time. That's why Jesus in the days of his flesh said, call no man father. In the days of his flesh, he said, do not call anyone father, because for you to call someone father is because you identify him. You come out of orphanhood. Back then, no one could call anyone a father. Now upon Paul's arrival, he declares, I have been a father figure to you, and you are my beloved children. Because Paul brought something where Jesus Christ first laid his head. It was not a pillow. Hear this clearly, blessed one. I want to appeal to your clean understanding. I want to save you. I want you to understand, please. Since we're discussing something other than him searching for a pillow. I often found myself wondering why he didn't have a place to rest his head. No matter if it's just a manger or anywhere else, you need somewhere to lay your head. He must have slept because he was fully human and had that basic need for rest. But then I would say, lay his head down. What, you don't have a pillow? He just didn't have where to put the predestined wisdom. And finally, for he found it in Paul. But that remained there, it remained written without revelation, because as this was for the nations, it was then placed on standby, as it is commonly referred to. Then, the head left a piece of information in Paul, but returned 2,000 years later. The world an orphanage, and Christ had nowhere to lay his head. It was coming for a people, and that people, where he has laid his head, is in this ministry. For the second time, he discovered a comfortable pillow and laid his head down. Hey, and what is the purpose of a body having a head? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, please. Quickly now. Ephesians. Take note. Those of you who are watching me on the internet, study this, please. Because we are talking about life or death. If you do not understand the message that Jesus Christ is giving you right now, you are going to fail as a religious or whatever. You will fail. Because the head is speaking to you. The head. Chapter 4, verse 15. Look how it says. It says, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working, by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. For the first time in history, we find a ministry that has a head and nurtures and helps each other, and we all believe the same. The unity of the Spirit has arrived. Do not tell me that the Catholic Church has a head, because if it has a head, it has a very sick head. Do you see that Protestants and evangelicals have one head? Yes, and why do they differ so much if they have one head? So far in history, the head of Christ had not come to earth. He had not laid his head down. For if there is one body and one head, the body and the head go together and help each other growing in love. For this is a ministry of love. The very fact that we do not know you according to the flesh. Look, it is the greatest expression of love a person can receive. We are not interested in your past. That when you get here, look, I don't care what happened before in your life. What matters to me is that you are a chosen one. But hey, I'm actually coming to your church. Shouldn't you be curious about who I am? No, I don't care. I don't know you in the flesh. But don't you know that I killed 5 people? Well, you could have killed 100 and I don't care. No, but I have a black record. It could be white, black, gray, or any other color. If you are a chosen one, you are a chosen one, and that is like waters that have passed. Your past is buried immediately. Because you know your true identity. Now look at what it says. What it says. The gospel of the head, Ephesians chapter 1. Now let's go to the verse. To chapter 1, verses 22 and 23. Verse 22 says, and he put all things under his feet, and gave him to be head over all things. To whom? And he put all things under his feet, and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. Growing in grace has one head. And that head works with the church. the church recognizes its head. That is why I have never called myself anything here. I have never given myself a title. Do you know who gives me the title? The church. Because it says here that the church is his body. And the church knows how to identify its head. Because it walks well, it walks in the right direction. It has guidelines. For the first time in history, brother, how wonderful is this ministry. That for the first time from heaven, God's head comes down and a man named Jose Luis de Jesus puts it in. First letter to the Corinthians, chapter 2. Let's see what the head does. When he lays his head down, look at how the Apostle Paul speaks in chapter 2 of the first letter to the church of the Corinthians. In verse 6. It says, however, we speak wisdom among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom. That is where he laid his head. The hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages for our glory. Therefore he said, I will not leave you orphans. I am not going to leave them orphaned. I am going to give them the information. And it is the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages for our glory, which none of the rulers of this age knew. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the mind of man, into the heart of man, the things which God has prepared for those who love him, but God has revealed them to us. By whom? By whom? Do you see that Spirit is written in capital letters there? God revealed them to us through his Spirit, for the Spirit searches all things, yes, the deep things of God. Then speaking of the spirit of man, it says, for what man knows the things of a man except the spirit of the man? Spirit in lowercase. Except the spirit of the man which is in him. Even so, no one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. And where the Spirit of God is, there is freedom. Here is the Spirit of God. I am totally convinced that the head of God was put in my head. I have the evidence. There is evidence. It is inevitable not to be able to see that this is what has happened in our ministry. And you are the Lord's church. And this is a body that is not adrift. With much regret, I must say that the other churches are adrift. How are they going to tell me that is the head of God if it doesn't match? It does not agree with the gospel nor with the scriptures. Everything we see. And they do not agree because the head is the one which reveals that in the 14 epistles of Paul, there is where the mind of Christ lies. That mystery was there. You know that in the Old Testament there was a time when the people were in confusion, and then Elijah, prophet of God, he was saying, well, I'm the head, I'm the one who represented God at that time, right? And then there were the prophets of Baal, there were 450 prophets of Baal, and they said, we are the voice of God. And then Elijah said, no, I am the voice of God. 450 against one. And then, because the people could not find what to do, and so Elijah stood in front of the people and said to the people, let's make a deal. We are going to put an ox on an altar and let the 450 prophets of Baal cry out to God, and I'll put another ox on another altar. And may God send fire and consume that ox. That is God and the people agreed. Afterwards, the 450 prophets of Baal started calling out in the morning, then quickly prepared an ox by cutting it into pieces, as was traditionally done in the Old Testament for sacrifice. But to put an ox on an altar without fire, it didn't make common sense, because the idea is that the fire consumes the animal so that the sacrifice is acceptable before the Lord. As the morning dawned, the prophets raised their voices and cried out to Baal, asking for a response to prove to the people that they were indeed the true messengers of God. And well, the morning went by and the afternoon came, and they were already screaming, crying out, as do certain groups out there who cry out for the power of God and say, manifest your power. Manifested your power and began to hurt their bodies and spurt blood. And then Elijah, for the security that he had, he said, look, maybe God is on vacation. Keep on crying out, or maybe it is that he has fallen asleep. He began to mock them. He said maybe he is too busy and can't attend to them. So when they got tired and they couldn't take it anymore, he said, okay, now it's my turn. And then they set the ox, and he said to them, dig a trench around the ox and bring me 4 pitchers of water and 12 stones representing each tribe. These are my 14 epistles. He set up 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel. And then it was not an easy job, because it was hilly. They had to bring up water until they filled the ditch completely with water. And then Elijah stood up and said, Lord, so that this people may know that I am your voice here on earth, and that these people are false, answer me with fire. And for the time being, it came out a lot of fire came out of the sky like this, and it consumed all the flesh of the ox, and even the water dried up from the fire that came down. And the people said, Jehovah. And Elijah speak to the people. The 450 prophets of Baal are liars, and God does not speak in them. Brother, and the time is coming where Growing in Grace Ministries is coming, is saying to a people, here is the Lord, here is the voice of God, and God is going to answer. I challenge all these false teachings. I challenge them in humility, as they will, in front of the people, in front of the cameras, to bring me their information to see if it is consistent with the gospel of the uncircumcision. God does not speak for them. God speaks through this mouth that is here. I declare today, I declare on this day, by the cameras of the internet, by cameras worldwide and with evidence, I declare that they have missed the mark. If you want to know about God, they have to listen to me. If they want to place their lives, they have to submit to this apostolate, to this ministry, so that they can focus their lives with God. Because all of you have erred and are orphans. People who criticize us are like orphans. They have no father. They are in a state of orphanhood. They don't know who their father is. They don't know where the mind of Christ is located. They have no head. It is a headless body walking to and fro, and it has no direction.